Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. I remember it was sometime in June of 2021 when I, along with my best friends, Sarah, Jake, and Sam, decided to escape the city for a much-needed break. We were all tired of being cooped up for so long due to the pandemic and needed a change of scenery. Sarah suggested renting an Airbnb for a weekend in a remote town to enjoy the great outdoors and, well, just be together. Little did we know we were about to experience something that would change our lives forever. We found an old but charming cabin-style house deep in the woods, surrounded by towering trees and miles away from the nearest neighbor. The listing mentioned it was a historic property with a colorful past that intrigued us even more. We booked it right away and could hardly contain our excitement for the trip. The day finally arrived, and we packed up our gear and headed for the Airbnb. The drive was long and winding, and the GPS signal became spotty as we entered the dense forest. As the trees parted, we caught our first glimpse of the cabin. It was even more beautiful than in the pictures. A sense of serenity washed over us as we approached the property, and we couldn't wait to get settled in. As we entered the cabin, we were greeted by the musty scent of an old house. The decor was dated but had a certain charm to it. It was as if we had stepped back in time. We were eager to explore every nook and cranny, so we quickly divided the chores, unpacked, and began our weekend adventure. That first night, we gathered around the fireplace, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. We felt so at ease, so connected with nature and each other. That is until we began hearing strange noises. At first, we brushed it off as the sounds of an old house settling, but as the night went on, the noises grew more frequent and disturbing. The creaks of the floorboards, the rattling of the windows, and the faint whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. We tried to laugh it off, but there was no denying that we were all on edge. The next day, after a restless night's sleep, we decided to explore the property further. We stumbled upon an old shed behind the cabin that wasn't mentioned in the listing. The door was padlocked, but Jake managed to pick the lock with a paperclip. Inside, we found dusty furniture, old tools, and a stack of old newspaper clippings from decades ago. As I read through the articles, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They detailed a series of grisly murders that had occurred in the cabin during the 1930s. According to the reports, a man named Harold had lured his victims into the cabin, one by one, under the guise of renting it out. He had meticulously planned and executed each murder, leaving no trace behind. It was a chilling revelation, and I felt like we were in grave danger. I showed my friends the clippings, and we all agreed that we had to leave the cabin immediately. We packed our things in a hurry, our hearts pounding in our chests. But as we prepared to leave, the strange occurrences began to escalate. The doors slammed shut on their own, the lights flickered erratically, and the whispers grew louder and more insistent. We were terrified, but we were also determined to get out of there as quickly as possible. As we made our way to the car, I felt a sudden coldness envelop me, and I could barely breathe. I felt as if I were being suffocated by an unseen force. My friends noticed my struggle and rushed to help, but as they did, they experienced the same sensations. We were all gasping for air, our vision blurring, but we pushed through the terror and made it to the car. As we sped away from the cabin, we felt the malevolent presence lift, and our breaths returned to normal. We didn't say much on the drive back, each of us lost in our thoughts, trying to process what had just happened. We knew we had narrowly escaped something truly sinister, and it was a feeling we would never forget. Once we were back in the city, we couldn't forget the memories of that weekend. We started to research the history of the cabin more thoroughly, trying to make sense of our experience. We learned that Harold, the murderer, had been caught and executed for his crimes, but locals believed that his spirit remained in the cabin, seeking vengeance. With this new information, we felt an obligation to warn others about the cabin's dark history. We contacted the Airbnb host and told them everything we had discovered and experienced. To our surprise, they seemed unfazed by our story and assured us they had never encountered any paranormal activity at the property. They even insinuated that our imaginations had gotten the best of us. We didn't accept their dismissal, though. We left a detailed review on the listing, warning potential renters about our experience, and contacted Airbnb directly. We were relentless in our efforts to make sure no one else would have to go through what we did. Months passed, and the cabin was eventually removed from the Airbnb platform. We later found out that other guests had reported similar experiences, and local authorities were investigating the property. We couldn't help but feel a sense of relief knowing that we might have saved others from a terrifying ordeal. It was August in the summer of 2022 when my extended family and I decided to embark on a much-needed vacation. We had been cooped up at home for so long that we all yearned for an escape to someplace new and refreshing. One of my cousins knew a place through a family friend in northern Wales where we could explore the beautiful countryside and soak in the rich culture and history of the region. After searching for a while, we found a massive country house on Airbnb that seemed perfect for our large family gathering. The house was an architectural marvel with ivy-covered walls, a sprawling garden, and a mysterious aura that piqued our curiosity. We couldn't wait to explore the ancient structure and its surrounding grounds. Our group, consisting of cousins, aunts, uncles, and grandparents, arrived at the house, excited to begin our vacation and create unforgettable memories together. As we settled in and began exploring the various rooms, we couldn't help but notice the sheer size of the place. It seemed almost endless, with secret passages, hidden nooks, and countless rooms filled with antiques and relics from a bygone era. It was easy to get lost in the labyrinth of hallways, but we rejoiced in the adventure it provided. We spent our days exploring the nearby countryside, visiting pretty villages, and enjoying the lush landscapes of northern Wales. In the evenings, we would gather around the fireplace, sharing stories, laughing, and simply enjoying each other's company. The house seemed to come alive with our presence, and it felt as if we were breathing new life into its old bones. On our first night, as we lay in our beds, we began to hear strange noises coming from the attic. It sounded like rustling, as if someone or something was moving about above us. At first, we dismissed it as the house settling, or perhaps a small animal that had found its way inside. After all, the house was old, and it wasn't uncommon for critters to seek refuge in such places. However, the rustling persisted for the next 2 days, growing louder and more unsettling. Our curiosity soon turned to concern, and we couldn't help but feel uneasy about the mysterious sounds emanating from the attic. We decided to take turns keeping watch at night, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was causing the noises. But each night, despite our vigilance, we saw nothing out of the ordinary. By the third day, the rustling had become impossible to ignore. We held a family meeting to discuss our options, and it was unanimously decided that we needed to investigate the attic. Some of us were frightened, while others were driven by a sense of adventure, but we all knew that we couldn't ignore the situation any longer. As we searched the house for a way to access the attic, we stumbled upon a small laundry room tucked away behind a hidden door. Among the cleaning supplies, one of my aunts found an old skeleton key that seemed out of place. The key was heavy and ornate, and it piqued our curiosity even more. We couldn't help but wonder if this was the key to unlocking the secret behind the strange noises in the attic. Gathering our courage, we climbed the creaky stairs leading to the attic door, the rustling growing louder with each step. My hands trembled as I inserted the key into the lock, and as I turned it, we heard a soft click. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with boxes, old furniture, and cobwebs. The smell that greeted us was a nauseating mix of feces and stale cigarette smoke. As our eyes adjusted to the darkness, we spotted an elderly man huddled in the corner of the room. He was filthy and scruffy, his eyes wide with fear. We were shocked and horrified by the discovery, but we knew we had to act quickly. We immediately called the police, and they arrived within minutes. As they took the man into custody, they informed us that he was a vagrant who had been squatting in the attic for quite some time. He had managed to sneak into the house before our arrival, and he had been living in the attic ever since, coming out only at night to scavenge for food. The police escorted the man from the property, and we were left to process the bizarre and disturbing events that had unfolded. We couldn't help but feel a mixture of pity and revulsion for the man who had been secretly living among us. As the days passed and we continued our vacation, it didn't feel the same as memory of the attic and the man we had found there had played any good memory we had of that place. We started discussing the history of the house, wondering if there were any other secrets hidden within its walls. Our curiosity and uneasiness grew with each passing day, and we found ourselves exploring every inch of the house, searching for clues that might reveal more about its past. During one of our expeditions, we discovered a hidden room behind a bookshelf in the library. Inside, we found a trove of old journals and diaries belonging to the house's previous occupants. We spent hours poring over the pages, fascinated by the stories they contained. Among the accounts of daily life, we found several entries detailing strange occurrences in the house, many of which seemed eerily similar to our own experiences. The more we read, the more convinced we became that the house held secrets far beyond the vagrant in the attic. As our vacation drew to a close, we couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that we would soon be leaving the house and its mysteries behind. We'd enjoyed our time together, but the unsettling events had cast a shadow over our stay, leaving us all eager to return to the safety of our own homes. We left the country house with a mixture of nostalgia and trepidation. The memories of our time there forever etched in our minds. We still talk about the trip, our voices tinged with both awe and fear as we recount the strange events that transpired. We may never fully understand what happened in that house, but one thing is certain. We will never forget our family vacation in northern Wales and the chilling secrets that lay hidden within the walls of the ancient country house. I had just landed in Antwerp, Belgium on a business trip to sell some high-quality diamonds. This was supposed to be a quick and straightforward trip, so I didn't bother booking a fancy hotel. Instead, I chose an Airbnb that seemed decent enough, despite its less than stellar reviews. After all, I was only going to stay for one night, and my main focus was on the business meeting I had scheduled for the following day. The Airbnb was located in a relatively quiet part of town, in an old building with a certain charm to it. When I arrived, I couldn't help but notice the worn facade and the creaking floorboards, but I didn't pay it much mind. I was tired from my journey, and all I wanted was to get some rest before my big meeting. After settling in and unpacking my essentials, I decided to call it a night. As I lay in bed, I had this odd sense that something was really weird about the place. The room felt colder than it should have, and there was an eerie silence that seemed to envelop the entire building. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that it was just the unfamiliar surroundings playing tricks on my mind. Maybe I was just tired from the traveling. It wasn't long before I began to hear strange noises outside my door. It sounded like footsteps, as if someone was pacing the hallway, accompanied by faint whispers that I couldn't quite make out. I tried to ignore the sounds, attributing them to other guests in the building or perhaps just my imagination running wild. But as the night wore on, the footsteps and whispers persisted, growing louder and more insistent. I tossed and turned, unable to find sleep, my mind racing with thoughts of what could be causing the disturbances. At one point, I even considered leaving the Airbnb and finding a hotel, but I knew I had a busy day ahead and couldn't afford to waste any more time. So I reluctantly stayed put, counting the hours until morning. When the first light of day finally broke through the curtains, I was relieved. I had managed to get a few hours of restless sleep, and I was eager to put the strange events of the night behind me. As I got ready for my meeting, I realized that my wallet and watch were missing. I searched the room frantically, trying to remember where I had last seen them. But no matter how hard I looked, they were nowhere to be found. I was running out of time and couldn't afford to delay my meeting any longer. So with a heavy heart, I left the Airbnb, hoping that I had simply misplaced my belongings and would find them when I returned later that day. The meeting went well, and I managed to secure a lucrative deal for the diamonds. Despite my success, I again had a nagging feeling that something was wrong back at the Airbnb. As soon as the meeting ended, I rushed back, my heart pounding in my chest. As I approached the building, I noticed that the door to my room was wide open. Panic set in, and I sprinted up the stairs, fearing the worst. When I entered the room, my fears were confirmed. My luggage was open, its contents strewn across the floor. It was evident that someone had gone through my things, searching for valuables. I immediately contacted the Airbnb host and the local authorities to report the theft. The police arrived, took my statement, and began their investigation. While they couldn't find any signs of forced entry, they did mention that there had been a string of similar incidents in the area, with travelers reporting missing belongings and strange occurrences during their stays. As the police continued their investigation, I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine, thinking about the footsteps and whispers I had heard during the night. I wondered if the thief had been lurking just outside my door, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. The realization that I had been so close to danger left me feeling vulnerable and violated. With no other option, I decided to check into a hotel for the remainder of my stay in Antwerp. I spent the rest of the trip trying to enjoy the city and focus on my work, but the incident at the Airbnb continued to haunt me. I had definitely been watched and targeted, and it made me question my decision to choose a cheaper accommodation option in a foreign city. When it was finally time to return home, I couldn't help but feel relieved to leave Antwerp and the unsettling events that had transpired there. As I boarded my flight, I promised myself that I would be more cautious in the future, prioritizing my safety and well-being above all else. Who knows what they could have done to me while I slept? Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.